The United States military says that Kuwait has accidentally shot down 3 American fighter jets in that tiny country as they were engaged against Iran in open air-to-air combat. This shows just how chaotic the wider situation has gotten in the Middle East just days after the American-Israeli campaign against Iran started. Now, this attack in Kuwait saw the Iranians actually fly fighter jets themselves into that country alongside drones and missile fire. And the Kuwaitis mistakenly thought the American fighter jets were enemy aircraft. That's according to U.S. Military Central Command that says all the pilots on board safely bailed out and are now receiving medical care. But Iran has widened its list of targets as following. They today attacked refineries in both Kuwait and in Qatar and in Saudi Arabia, including its Ras Tanur facility, which can process 500,000 barrels of crude oil a day. And this is starting to become a worry for analysts who say that global oil prices could spike even higher if the flow of oil is disrupted out of this crucial region. Already, we have seen attacks on shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. That's the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf through which about 1/5 of all oil traded passes. And the Omanis today said that another ship came under attack off their coast by a drone boat which carried explosives. That boat exploded, sparking a fire on board that vessel, and killed one of the sailors, who was an Indian, on board.
We don't have the exact details about this. So there are different estimation, different number that we are getting, like particularly at this stage, the most crucial one is the ballistic missile. So it's the missile stocks, the number that we are hearing that ranges from 2,000 to 5,000-6,000. The Iranian also put it as high as like 20,000+. So we really do not have the exact number. But nevertheless, with the passage of time, obviously, this will put a pressure on these missiles. With the passage of time, there will be more and more pressure on this, particularly if this is going to be a long and a drawn-out war. Apart from the missiles, obviously, you have the drones, and probably the number of the drones that Iran has is much higher. The other things that Iran is obviously can use and potentially might use is mining the Hormuz Strait, so therefore, like apart from closing it to the international trade, but also mining it, so therefore bringing the cost to the regional states, to the international actors. So this is also a possibility that Iran can utilize as all of them as part of this asymmetric warfare, but also combined by now Iran's growing sense of existential threat, the survival, the existential crisis that it is facing, both for the regime, but also for the collapse of the state authority in total. But also Iran has obviously the regional network, its regional networks, the proxy networks. It's from the Iraqi Shia militia groups to Hezbollah in Lebanon, to Houthis in Yemen. So the various Shia militia groups and their capability, the longer that this conflict goes on, the more trouble and the problem that the regime is likely to face in multiple forms. One of them is obviously the threat on the central authority, whether we might see the weakening of the central authority or the collapse of it as the war goes on. So even if it doesn't collapse, it might be that it can lose more and more the control of the periphery, while at the same time concentrating in the heartland. But I think with the war, with the airstrikes, it is difficult to see a scenario in which we will see the large protest types, because that is like more risky and more difficult. The analysis should be more grounded. It's unlikely that a regime change can happen through the airstrikes alone, through the air air force alone. So this is unlikely to happen, particularly in a country like Iran, in which the regime is quite institutionalized, is quite widespread, with decentralized network of power that has been widespread across the country. So therefore, a regime change scenario in the short span of time, it doesn't seem to be a very plausible one. But however, the regime transformation, the regime weakening, the regime emerging highly weakened is a likely scenario, and that depending on the perception of the weakness of the regime, that might trigger different domestic groups. Well, it is already becoming quite widespread, and I think this is precisely the strategy that Iran thinks that is the only strategy that it can put enough pressure on Trump, particularly, to change the course of the action. Because right now, the only person that can call off this war or end the war is a Trump. And I think that is the actor that Iran is aiming at through various forms. First, by attack on the Gulfs. Obviously, the calculation probably in Tehran was that the Gulf actors will see the consequence, the cost of these attacks. So therefore, they will engage in more lobbying of Trump to end the war. And similarly, by attacking different, or by closure of the Hormuz, given that around 20% of the international oil trade that goes through these straits, so that the impact of this will be more on international energy prices, or on international economy, might be another factor that will push Trump to rethink its action.
播报新闻是我的日常，必须时刻保持妆容和皮肤的最佳状态。当来到人生中最重要的时刻，也是 KS 逆时奇迹帮助我轻松驾驭，闪闪发光。KS 逆时奇迹活肤露全效精华、精华霜，多达5种 EGF 6大冻龄关键成分，保湿效果让我非常满意，小细纹也不再困扰我。我就是我自己的最佳女主角。KS 让我从容自信，光彩动人。我是我人生中的大女主，我的最爱我做主。KS 逆时奇迹系列热卖中，下单请上快点购，透过中天新闻网 App 下单立减50，或输入 CTI 推荐码有额外折扣。